Hello and welcome to CUNY News Now. I'm Carlos Garcia.
And I'm Marissa Braswell. Good morning.
The weather is cloudy with a low of 31 and a high of 39. While there's no chance of showers today, New York City has been experiencing heavy rains in recent years. Marissa has the story.
For Martine Ertz Needham, battling climate change looks like this. The longtime Sunnyside resident spends at least once a week in the fall clearing leaves out of storm drains by her apartment to prevent flooding.
My basement was flooded, and it came through the sewers, it came through the bathroom, it came through the front, the basement door. So after it was done, I inquired with a lot of people, and a lot of Skillman Avenue was flooded.
Flooding is a new unwelcomed challenge.
I've never had a problem, nor had any of my neighbors experienced any flooding before Ida, the hurricane in 21. No one. So the extremes in weather are definitely happening.
These extreme weather events are happening all over the city due to climate change, and Queens is particularly affected.
Rain hits that hard and that fast as it did in Ida, anything that's like more low-lying is just going to get nailed.
Elaine O'Brien, one of the leaders of the climate justice organization Queens Climate Project, says this fight goes beyond Queens.
So there's been an acceleration and a new variety of climate disasters that affect people like right now, and so like, for example, the fires, like all of the smoke from Canada, that people were experiencing it in real time now.
Martine's battle against climate change has been expensive. She's bought sump pumps to get rid of water in her basement. It's also taken an emotional toll.
I'm very anxious, to be honest with you. I have what I call climate change anxiety, and I'm not the only one in my street. I know a few people who have the same thing. As soon as the rainfall is a little bit.
Martine is hopeful that her council member, Julie Wan, is taking resident concerns about this issue seriously, and more will be done by the city soon. Councilmember Wan has had several meetings with various city stakeholders regarding this issue. There's also a long-term project to increase drainage capacity, which would help Martine and her neighbors. For the New York City News Service, I'm Marissa Braswell. Up next, e-bikes are a speedy, climate-friendly alternative to cars for getting around the city. But are they causing too many accidents? Perry Gregory has more on the story.
E-bikes have become a prominent feature of New York City's transportation landscape in recent years, but some New Yorkers feel that they cause more harm than good. John Lenahan is an Upper West Side resident who had a run-in with an e-bike in September.
I was running on a Saturday morning on the Hudson River Path next to the West Side Highway, and just got hit directly from behind by an e-bike. I got launched and broke my fall like this, and dislocated my shoulder.
John will make a full recovery. His accident led him to join the E-Vehicle Safety Alliance, led by fellow Upper West Sider Janet Schroeder.
And what we're about is safety for all, people on bikes, pedestrians, cyclists, dogs, especially elderly and the more vulnerable, disabled and deaf and blind. We believe that accountability for e-bikes would be licensing and registration.
The group says licensing will stop e-bikes from riding on sidewalks. In 2022, there were 240 reported injuries from e-bike and moped accidents citywide and 1 pedestrian fatality.
The only way to have them more accountable to the rules that are already on place on the books by having them licensed.
City Councilman Robert Holden is sponsoring a bill that would require all new electric bikes and scooters to be registered with the Department of Transportation. It's not the first time that City Hall has entertained this idea.
Every decade or so, there's a bit of a push to license bicycles.
Transalt is a nonprofit organization that works to restructure New York City away from cars. Coordinator Emily Jacoby says that licensing bikes is a bad idea.
It's these licensing bills, they always kind of come down to this like attempt to shift behavior and make it harder for people to do what they're doing. And we found a lot of education and resources for safe riding and like other tactics and non-punitive measures do a lot more to have cyclists act more safely on the road than making them license.
Transalt says that Councilmember Holden's legislation is anti-climate and that it is a distraction from proven safety measures, like wider and more protected bike lanes.
We have to look at our streets as centers of our community life. What we do know is we don't need more cars on the road, and we don't need more gas-powered mopeds on the road that are also unregistered.
The bill to license e-bikes did not get enough sponsors in time to make it to a council vote at City Hall this year. For the NYCity News Service, I'm Perry Gregory.
And speaking of transit, a group in Sunset Park is advocating for radical changes to the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. I met some of them recently. Sunset Park on 5th Avenue and 42nd Street in Brooklyn is tranquil, green, and has gorgeous views of Manhattan. 2 blocks away on 3rd Avenue, it's a different story. The Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, or BQE, cuts through the heart of the Sunset Park neighborhood. Under it is the dark, loud, 6-lane roadway of 3rd Avenue. Some local residents are tired of the BQE and 3rd Avenue as currently constructed and are fighting for change.
My mom got asthma, my father got asthma, my 2 sisters and my brother, we all grew up in the same house. And it's that's how I feel like made it worse, because living underneath the highway.
Unfortunately, we've had our share of deaths along the corridor.
The red dots indicate pedestrian and cyclist deaths in the last 5 years. There have been 8 total on the Gowanus Expressway, also known as 3rd Avenue, disproportionately higher than other streets in the neighborhood. A few weeks ago, the Department of Transportation released a proposal to improve pedestrian safety along 3rd Avenue. Some residents and organizers want the BQE gone.
I honestly want the whole highway to be destroyed, only because I see it as they only do it to low income neighborhoods. You wouldn't find these major roads in Wall Street or the wealthier neighborhoods. So it's I see this as segregation in a way. It's a segregated highway.
When it comes to the people who live directly under or directly near the BQE, we're talking about a predominantly Black and brown, predominantly lower income community that has been harmed for decades because of a structure that our city and state created.
I'd love to see the BQE torn down. I know that is a very pie in the sky conversation with some folks.
Highway destruction is something that we've seen in other cities where we didn't think it was possible. To me, it's less a matter of timeline and more a matter of political will.
On Monday, city officials will meet with Sunset Park's community board to discuss the new proposal. For the NYCity News Service, I'm Carlos Garcia.
Thanks, Carlos.
Advocates for a ceasefire in Gaza say that their position is underreported in mainstream press coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. Reporter Luca Goldmansour investigated bias in the coverage.
Tonight, Israel unleashes a massive attack on Gaza for the first time.
Israel's siege on Gaza continues to make national headlines.
Israel and Hamas engage in some of the most intense fighting.
But in New York City, protesters say calls for a ceasefire are underreported, and the Palestinians whose community is under siege are underrepresented in corporate media.
Shame on you! Shame on you! I want to call out the editorial board that has refused to call for a ceasefire, that has called a ceasefire.
But do these complaints have merit? One media watchdog, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, or FAIR for short, claims to have the receipts. They studied 4 weeks of coverage of the conflict on the agenda-setting Sunday morning news shows. Think Meet the Press or Face the Nation. Out of the 41 guests to appear on these shows, only 1 was Palestinian. Only 4 of the guests were asked about a ceasefire, and only 2 advocated for one. A majority of the 34 American guests either had direct ties to the U.S. military or had taken a significant amount of money from military industry political action committees or pro-Israel lobbying groups. FAIR's senior analyst Julie Haller authored that study and says that this sort of bias isn't limited to pro-Israel politics.
Iraq. Anytime U.S. media are covering a war that the U.S. is directly involved in or an ally to, you see a very strong alignment with U.S. interests.
This can have a significant impact on the likelihood of policy outcomes, Haller says.
One of the important roles of media is to be something of a gatekeeper for political conversations. So ideas that the media won't give airtime to are ideas that have less of a chance impacting the public conversation.
This sort of impact can build up over decades, Haller says.
In the long decades of the conflict in the Middle East, there has always been a lack of context given. There's always new layers, new histories that are being told and reported in a certain way, and then those become part of the collective memory of our country. And so,
in 2020, the historian Maha Nasser surveyed 50 years of opinion pieces about Palestine in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Out of the thousands of articles, less than 2% were written by Palestinians. As the death count in Gaza passes 21,000, Palestinians want American lawmakers to demand a ceasefire and to end their almost $4 billion of annual military aid to Israel until there is a peaceful resolution to decades of occupation. And they want to tell their own story.
And we're back to local news. A lot of New Yorkers are still struggling to recover from the pandemic, and recent budget cuts haven't made it any easier. One soup kitchen in Morningside Heights is helping New Yorkers. Reporter Julian Tiburcio has more on the story.
Many New Yorkers could not pay their grocery bills at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, so Congress used emergency funds to increase food stamps. But these pandemic-era benefits were cut earlier this year, and now a lot of New Yorkers are going hungry once again.
I mean, the pandemic for a lot of society is over, but I think the economic effects are still being felt quite broadly, specifically amongst our guests.
Isaac Alderstein is the executive director for Broadway Community, a nonprofit that runs a soup kitchen and a food pantry. Alderstein says more people have started turning to Broadway Community.
Reminds to the beginning of this year when the federal government cut the additional food stamps assistance that was made available to many households during the pandemic. And you really saw a big spike here at Broadway.
Broadway Community Soup Kitchen has served 148% more meals this year compared to 2022, a number that Alderstein says has been increasing every month. But keeping up with this demand hasn't been easy since the soup kitchen started serving people indoors again, according to longtime volunteer Catherine Graybill.
The great thing when the pandemic hit, the city, the foundations were very proactive with helping organizations like ours that were trying to meet that need. Now there's not so much of that anymore, so there's much more competition for those dollars.
While charities and nonprofits like Broadway Community help and feed many people, there's only so much that can be done without policy solutions.
So there are proven policy solutions to reducing the length of the lines here at soup kitchens and food pantries. But those are not being invested in as much as we would like.
Still, there's hope for the future of food stamps, at least in New York. State Assembly member Jessica Gonzalez Rojas recently signed a letter to Governor Kathy Hochul, asking her to raise the minimum SNAP benefit in the state to $100 per month in 2024. While it's too early to see how this letter will affect next year's state budget, it's one step closer to helping New Yorkers feed themselves. For the New York City News Service, this is Julian Tiburcio.
A newer technology is affecting some New Yorkers in a different way. Reporter Jayana Smith spoke to one acting student about his concerns with AI and how it could affect the future of the entertainment industry.
Lancey! Yes, it's me, Delancey! Who the fuck are you? It's me, Remington, who you call Delancey!
Atlantic Acting School student Corey Terrell loves his craft.
Stories have always fascinated me. To then become
a career and a life to do, a life of telling stories, I had to sign up.
However, like many other acting students and professionals, he fears that artificial intelligence could jeopardize his passion.
I am not Morgan Freeman, and what you see is not real.
I just don't understand why we are trying to recreate human authenticity and identity. It just doesn't quite make sense to me.
Since the popularization of generative AI tools like ChatGPT and DALL-E 2, different industries have rushed to integrate AI into their day-to-day operations. The film industry is no different. This year, Actors Union SAG-AFTRA went on a historic nearly 8-month strike, in part due to a proposal by production studios to scan background actors and use their images in film perpetually without consent. Voice actors, many of whom aren't unionized, have also spoken out about their voices being used to train AI.
No AI algorithm is able to make something out of nothing. And that human-generated content that's used in the training data reflects real and substantial work, and it's intellectual property, and it deserves legal protection.
Such proposals have prompted action from government officials. In October, the Federal Trade Commission held a virtual roundtable to discuss how to protect free trade and fair competition in the age of artificial intelligence.
We cannot lose sight of the fundamental truth that technology is a tool to be used by humans. Humans are not and should not be used by technology.
President Joe Biden also signed a sweeping bill early November to balance AI and tech innovation with consumer and labor rights.
As artificial intelligence expands the boundary of human possibility and tests the bounds of human understanding, this landmark executive order is a testament to what we stand for: safety, security, trust, openness.
How effective these government actions will be has yet to be seen. But Terrell says that he will continue to fight for his craft.
I guess it could replace jobs in the future. And if that happens, that's the end of art. If I'm the last generation to fight for art, well, I'm fighting strong, going all the way.
For NYCity News Service, this is Gianna Smith.
That's it for this edition of News Now. I'm Marissa Braswell.
And I'm Carlos Garcia. See you next time.